Hi, and welcome to In Search of Insight, Nootropics Depot's monthly podcast. I'm your podcast host, Erika, and sitting next to me, as always, is our product specialist at Nootropics Depot, Emiel.
Hey everyone.
And today we're super happy to be joined by Paul, the founder, owner, and thinker behind Nootropics Depot. We're going to be talking about a really, really popular and exciting product. It happens to be our new fiber product, InfiniFiber. And we're going to be telling you about the formulation process, about all of the amazing reviews we've been hearing from you, from our customers, from our viewers. We've been hearing really, really amazing results that you guys are experiencing, so that's awesome. And we're going to talk about the science behind it, of course, as we do on every single podcast. So thanks so much for tuning in, and thanks, Paul, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks guys. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about why you decided we need to have a fiber supplement in the Nootropics Depot catalog.
So fiber has been kind of a hot topic, at least the last year, 2 years. I think a lot of people out there have probably been seeing the instances of colon cancer, rectal cancer going up, high profile deaths from younger and younger people from colon and rectal cancer. The most recent one was James Van Der Beek, the actor from Dawson's Creek, who was 48 years old, had 6 kids, and then died from a fight with colon cancer and rectal cancer. So, it is now the largest source of cancer death in people under 50. So I've been seeing that the last 2 years. I've been looking out and seeing the rising rates of colon cancer, seeing the deaths get younger and younger. Ironically, my wife also was sending me articles and turning me on to this idea of there's something going on here with colon cancer. There's something that needs to be addressed. And my wife is 41, I'm 40. You know, we're at that age that we need to start thinking about, hey, colonoscopies will start becoming in our future, and probably, maybe based on the data, should have already started. But growing up, I just, probably like a lot of viewers here, saw commercials on TV of old people with metamucil, right? They've got a cup, they're stirring in the metamucil. And when you're young, you're like, oh, okay, these old people are taking fiber, and it's something that maybe I'll have to do when I'm 70, but not now. And I think that pervasive viewpoint, at least personally for me, made me not take fiber seriously, because it's an old person thing, and I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing that maybe should be studied someday. The ads that you're exposed to as you're growing up, that are meant to try and say, hey, you got to take your fiber seriously. When you're a young kid, you're like, well, I'm not old, I don't want to deal with that. So it almost makes you think, I don't need to take fiber seriously. So when I started seeing the instances of cancer go up, and I started reading the research studies, and I started really doing the research in the background on why, like, what's going on? Why are 48-year-olds dying of colon cancer? And not like somebody that didn't have access to really good health care. He was a wealthy actor that seemingly had, in the United States, that seemingly had access to the best doctors and the best facilities out of Los Angeles. Why was he not able to fight this off, and why did he have to go through it in the first place? So I really started looking inward and going, I'm not taking fiber seriously. I'm 40 now. What if I'm being an idiot? And I intermittent fast, so I eat 1 meal a day. And I usually eat in a 1 to 2 hour eating window. So most of my day is fasted. And I've worked up to that point, and I just feel better in a fasted state now. But it also means that when I eat, it's really hard to get the RDI of fiber in 1 meal, unless you're trying to do so. So the InfiniFiber really stemmed from my wife and I kind of talking and going, hey, are we taking fiber seriously enough? And the answer was no, for my wife and for me. And in doing so, I said, okay, well, we need to take fiber seriously. How do I do that? Well, I need to go out and buy a good fiber. And that's where I'm like, okay, well, we don't currently have a fiber. Who out there is selling a fiber that would be good? And that's generally how a lot of our new products get started these days. It's us internally going, hey, we want to have access to X. And then we go out and go, what exists on the market for X? And then we go, well, not a whole hell of a lot exists on the market the way we want it, so we got to develop it. And that's really what happened with fiber. And I said, okay, Now Foods is pretty good. They fail sometimes, but generally, if I buy a Now Food supplement, it's probably not going to be totally fake. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go buy Now Foods Psylium Husk. And then Thorne, similarly, like Thorne has gone through some changes now with their buyout from LVMH. So I don't necessarily trust their science as much as I did, but when I buy a Thorne supplement, I know I'm not going to get something completely fake. So generally, if I'm like, all right, there's something we don't carry, I need to go out and try something early and start beta testing things, I'll generally look at Now Foods and Thorne and go, okay, this is at least safe for me to take. So that's what I did. I bought the Psyllium Husk from Now Foods, and I bought the FiberMend from Thorne. And I started beta testing both of them. And what I noticed immediately, I think Psyllium Husk is fairly well tolerated, and it's kind of the go-to these days, right? Mm-hmm. And with Psyllium Husk, it swells a lot. So the nice thing or the bad thing, depending on who you are, that swelling does provide more fullness. So when I started taking the Psyllium Husk, it really helped with that. Like if you're in the middle of the day and you're fasting and for some reason you get hungry, taking Psyllium Husk because of that swelling action makes you feel more full. So it allows you to wait until your normal eating window. But then the FiberMend was more of a fermentable probiotic, a prebiotic. And immediately I started noticing, I don't know who designed this fiber supplement, but it's way too fermentable too quickly.
Okay, but can you be a little more specific there? Or do you not want to be more specific?
No, I mean, we're talking about fiber, we're talking about, stool and pooping and serious stuff like colon cancer and rectal cancer. You have to be able to talk about these things, or else they're just going to continue to perpetuate because nobody's going to address them. So the side effects that I was getting were bloating and gas. That's the most common side effect that people have by jumping into a fiber. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I just need to take a half dose. And even then, the half dose was causing bloating and gas. And, to be perfectly frank, I was farting all day. Like it went 0 to 100. And I'm like, okay, I know we need fermentable fiber. I know we need to feed the good probiotics in our system. But if somebody off the street, an average consumer says, all right, I need to eat more fiber, they start taking FiberMend and they immediately get bloated and gassy all day, they're going to stop, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
One of the biggest determiners of whether a treatment from your doctor is going to work is whether or not you stick with it. And that's universal across whatever it is you're treating. If whatever you're taking to treat, whatever symptom you're having, it makes other symptoms worse and you just stop it, then it didn't help you in the long run. So I immediately said, okay, the Psyllium Husk is fine. It does what it does, but it's not very interesting. It's just Psyllium Husk. And Psyllium Husk has a lot of problems with heavy metals because most of the Psyllium Husk is grown in India and it absorbs a lot of lead from the environment. So I'm like, and everybody's selling Psyllium Husk. So I'm like, I'm not just going to bring out a Psyllium Husk. The FiberMend, I'm like, okay, this is a lot more complex of one. This seems more like what we would make at Nootropics Depot, more innovative, more thought process put into it. But the side effects were just way too high. So then I started looking around and I got Garden of Life Super Seed, which was pretty good. I think that one's a fairly interesting one in that it's mostly sprouted seed based, which it depends on who you talk to, right? Like there's a lot of people that are saying seeds are bad for you right now. So, but taking a little bit of the fiber blend, the psyllium husk, and the super seed together worked fairly well. And I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit more bloated. I have a little bit more gas to deal with, but I'm also buying 3 supplements from 3 different places, and it's not ideal. So I realized there wasn't a fiber supplement on the market that was what I would want. And I know it's cliche, you hear this a lot from people, from owners of supplement brands online right now, especially the more influencer driven ones. They're like, what I wanted didn't exist, so I went out and created it. And it's become kind of a trope. But for me, it's true. Like that's what Nootropics Depot is. When I want something, we go out and develop it, and I make it the best it can be because I'm going to take it. I'm going to give it to my wife. I'm going to give it to my friends and family. So I need to make sure that it's the best it can be. And it's not just lip service. It's not just marketing. It's genuinely, this is the fiber that I wanted to see on the market, and it just didn't exist.
Yeah, I think that's something across all of our products. People ask us, why do they work so well? Well, it's because we want them to work well. We test them on ourselves until they work well. We don't just start with one formulation and then go, yeah, it looks good on paper. We're never going to try it. Just put it out onto the market. And I do think a lot of companies end up doing that. Maybe they have the right intention of wanting to develop a product for themselves and their family, but they don't go the extra mile of going, hey, maybe this is not ideal. Let's reformulate it a bit. And it's understandable why you wouldn't do that. We spent like 2 years, a year and a half on this product.
I was going to say, yeah, maybe some other companies are doing a bit of bioassaying and beta testing before the product actually comes out, but I feel like Nootropics Depot is pretty unique in the depth of the bioassaying that we do, and just the fact that like you will give me a sample of a new supplement, and without saying anything, sometimes what I should expect or what to be aware of, you just give it to me and say, hey, take this. What do you feel? What's different? Do you notice something? How long did it take? And I feel like that's pretty unique. Maybe there's some other companies. I don't know. Are there people from other supplement companies watching this podcast? If so, perhaps you want to share your beta testing practices or not? Nah, just kidding. But the point is, it is really personal, and also it's that beta testing circle is growing, bit by bit, but it's still really like the hardcore people who are willing to try new products and who also have the ability to explain and express what are we sensing, what are we feeling, what do we like, what do we not like, and to commit to taking it for a certain amount of time to know, like, yes, we like this extract. No, we don't like this formulation. And what do we need to take out? What do we need to add in? Can we make it more cost effective? Can we make it more streamlined? Can we make it more synergistic with the rest of our stack? Because it's also not like we're only taking a fiber supplement. We're also all taking lots of supplements. So it has to all work really well together. And that I do think is quite unique.
And to your point of not everyone being ready to do a beta testing of a very interesting, novel product that they might not understand, we've definitely seen that where like just a handful of us are trying it. But with fiber, everyone wanted to try it. Like there was really a push. And when people were running out, they're like, hey, can I have some more? And we kind of had to wait until the production batch. And we also ran out. We loved the sample. And I think you had the same issue. And,
Oh, yeah. Well, and then that's generally one of our indicators of how popular a supplement is going to be. If we're beta testing it and everybody runs out and goes, wait, how do I get more? And I know for my own use, when I'm beta testing it and I run out and I'm like, shit, I need to get more. And then, I'm talking to our ops manager going, can we make up another batch? Can we do this? I'm like, okay, that's signaling that we got it right. But and look, we're on the Nootropics Depot podcast, and I'm the owner of Nootropics Depot. Of course, I'm going to say we're better than everyone else, and nobody else is doing it right. But it's honestly true. I think one thing that a lot of people probably have realized with me over the years, I just say what I think, right? I'm kind of a no bullshit, call it how it is, no matter what the consequences of that are. And I'm also in the back end of the industry a lot, and a lot of people maybe watching this don't realize how tied into the back end side of the industry we are now. Through Omnian Labs, we're testing more and more products from all over the world, not just retail brands, but suppliers from all over the world are sending us samples because they realize Omniant can do testing, nobody else can. We're supplying ingredients to other brands. We're on the AOAC Functional Fungi Advisory Board. I'm on, I'm the chief or the science director of the Future Nutri Foundation, so we're doing a lot of testing there and outreach with brands. And we're just talking with everybody and working with everybody in the background. So we see a lot of how the industry works. We see how brands develop new products. We see how contract manufacturers formulate. We see how all of this stuff works. So when we say, look, nobody is doing what we're doing, sure, you can say, oh, well, it's just Nootropics Depot trying to market its stuff, but it's really true. And I think what's interesting is as we get more entrenched in the industry side of things, in the background of helping other brands do better, they've all been saying that to us too. The former, R&D director from Thorne, he's no longer there after the LVMH takeover and all the drama that happened there. But the guy that was the R&D guy behind Thorne for, I believe, 14 years, told us that we are the most innovative supplement company that nobody knows about, which is kind of true, right? Like, we're doing really interesting science, really interesting stuff. But I just looked at one of our competitors yesterday. Their creatine is selling 40,000 jars a month on Amazon.
Wow.
Just creatine.
Crazy.
And this is a competitor of ours that I've called out, that we've tested their products that have been fake, and just one of their SKUs is selling 40,000 jars a month, and we're not doing anywhere near that. So the idea that we're the most innovative supplement company doing things that no one else is, but not a lot of people have heard about us, I think it can be it could be hard for the people that are listening to this podcast to realize it, because we've been around 13 years. They're listening to our podcast. They're on our subreddit. They're probably getting our ads. It probably feels like Nootropics Depot is everywhere. But honestly, we're still really, really small fish in the grand scheme of things in the supplement industry. So that's what, for 13 years now, I've tried to let the brand speak for itself. I tried to let my brand speak for itself. I've tried to stay in the background. I've tried to kind of just, let my team and the brand lead the way. And then I would be, the man behind the curtain directing things. But being actually on this side of the camera is a fairly new thing. But I've realized that the average consumer wants to hear from the owner, from the people behind the brands. They want to realize that there's a human behind this brand that they're seeing everywhere. So I'm making a concerted effort to get on this side of the camera more, to explain our position on things, explain why we're developing certain things, and maybe give some back end insight into some of the interesting stuff that went along in the development process or in the industry itself.
And we're super glad to have you. And you have the most unique perspective of anybody that's connected to Nootropics Depot, because it's your baby and it's your life's work, and it's amazing because we are taking these products every single day. I'm benefiting from it, you're benefiting from it, we're sharing it with our friends and family. So to have you as a part of the conversation and to be able to see you and talk with you and ask you questions and hear the stories about how these things actually come together and all of the disasters that happen along the way too is also really, really interesting, because it makes the world of Nootropics Depot so much bigger for everybody who's listening. By the way, for those of you who are listening, if you haven't already given this video a thumbs up, please do that, because it definitely helps us and it helps us know that you're enjoying what you're watching. And if you have questions for us, you're welcome to write them in the chat, because Emiel, our product specialist, is going to be monitoring that live chat during the YouTube premiere. So
and
if you
maybe
have it
if
set
Paul
by,
has some time
that would
also, once it
maybe.
comes out.
yeah. Let us know what your questions are, or if you've taken InfiniFiber and if you've had some good experiences or not so good experiences. All of your feedback is super important to us. Okay, so now that we're at this point, I think it's probably time to talk about formulation because we've talked about the fact that fiber was advertised to all of us as children for old people, but we know that that's not the case. We know that fiber is healthy for people of all ages, and we're taking it. We're in our 30s. You're taking it. You're now 40. Um, why should we be taking fiber? Why did we formulate InfiniFiber the way that we did? And let's take a look at that really nice new bottle design.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got one here too.
Oh yeah. Double. Yeah, let's see if
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you got it. So these are very sexy, sleek new bottles. They look amazing.
Oh, it's actually
Yeah,
kind of
so
cool how it plays with the light. Oh,
yeah, and you can see our performance line are going to be in black. So here's the Systemax. This is a 3D printed bottle for some of the testing that we're doing, but yeah, and then Arinamax.
nice.
So we've spent the last year, over a year
Yeah.
now, on all of this. And yeah, I think our existing sort of style, it's definitely recognizable, right? Like there's a big brain on the front, but it is kind of a legacy sort of design. It's a lot of wasted space with just a bunch of lines, squiggly lines that look like a brain. So for many years now, we're like, look, we need to do a rebrand. We need to do a refresh of the packaging and the branding, but we have over 600 SKUs. So we knew that it was going to be a pain in the ass. Yeah, switching to all new bottles, all new labels, a whole new process. It's been a nightmare, and we're a year in now, and since we started the development of the actual labels, and the bottles, I think, should be shipping at the end of this month. They told us the end of last month. Now it's the end of this month. You know, oil prices are shooting up. Shipping prices are going everywhere. Tariffs are 600% and then none. And then now they're back. And so it's really hard to build a supply chain with this much uncertainty in the global economy right now. So hopefully our shipment comes at the end of the month. They're going to be soft touch. These are all custom designed bottles that I designed. They're all going to have child resistant caps now because I have a toddler, and any parents with toddlers probably know that, especially boys, they want to get into everything, and I take a lot of supplements every day, so there's a lot of supplement bottles that he can get access to. So I realized, okay, if I'm dealing with it, a bunch of our customers that are parents are dealing with it. So let's just do a really nice child resistant cap on all of our capsule bottles so that any parents out there can know their kids isn't going to take, let's say it's Dynamax, grab a fistful of capsules of Dynamax and then have to go to the hospital. And funny enough, I actually tested it. So I took our child resistant caps. I gave my toddler one of them and I told him to try and open it, and he couldn't open it. So we have real world beta testing on the new packaging too.
Perfect.
Excellent. The next generation of Nootropics Depot's beta testing team. Yeah,
Right.
nice. Okay, so let's talk about the formulation. Psyllium Husk, this is a really important element of it.
No, actually, because we didn't put it in there. Because what Paul was saying, we couldn't find one that had heavy metals in the right spec.
Okay, but there is an element of the current formulation which is expanding a little bit. What is that?
Yes.
The chia seed and the fenugreek fiber does it. The apple pectin swells.
Okay.
And a couple of them in there swell, but it's the level of swelling that's different. So with Psyllium Husk, it swells a lot. And more story time. So I told this story on Reddit, but maybe some people listening right now hadn't seen it on Reddit. My wife actually went to the hospital, about a month and a half ago for emergency surgery. So, we've been going through all this. We need more fiber. My wife was really worried about colon cancer. She's never been regular because I don't think she's ever really treated fiber seriously. So during the development process, we didn't have InfiniFiber out yet. So I got her on Now Food Psyllium Husk as well. And she was taking that. And I didn't realize it at the time. I've learned a lot more now. when you take psyllium husk, you have to increase your water intake. The amount of water that you were drinking before you started psyllium husk has to go up fairly significantly after you take psyllium husk. And it wasn't an issue for me because I'm constantly drinking water. I have a big 32-ounce glass of water that I'm filling up multiple times a day. I'm constantly drinking water. My wife, it's more of a chore to get her to drink water. So when she started taking the psyllium husk, she did not increase her water intake. And now I know that that can actually, result in a dangerous situation. And people can go online and search psyllium husk, small bowel obstruction, and it's more common than I think a lot of people realize. So she started having an upset stomach one night. Thought maybe, it was just food poisoning or just something else. So she went to bed. Eventually, I came up to bed in the middle of the night. She started really having pains. She went to go sleep on the couch downstairs. I woke up and she was in ton of pain, just ton of pain. And I could see it on her face. Like, all right, we have to go to the hospital. Something is wrong. So we rushed to the hospital. We got there. Luckily, we got there before, for people that don't know, in Arizona, we have what are called snowbirds. There's a lot of people that come from the colder states in the winter here because, it's going to be 86 degrees today. So they like the heat. They come here, but they're also generally older people. So in the winter, our hospitals get really over capacity because the older population swells in the valley in the winter. So luckily we got there early, and then like an hour later, the entire waiting room was full of people. So we lucked out. But we got in, did a CT scan, and they said, it looks like there's a bowel obstruction. We didn't do contrast. We need to go back and do contrast. But the doctors were like, okay. They're like, oh, it's okay. We'll figure it out. And then they put her in a room, and we were in there. Our phones were dying because we had been there all day. I'm like, everything seems kind of chill right now. Let me go home and get our phone chargers, and I'll come back. And when I went home, my son was here. My mom was watching him. And my wife said, hey, why don't you just bring our son back so he can see that I'm here? We kind of ran out early this morning. He's probably worried where mama is. So I'm like, all right, cool. I bring him back to the hospital. We get there. We're there about 10 minutes. And then suddenly the doctors start coming in. The surgeon comes in, the surgeon's assistant, and then I look outside the room. There's a bed. There's a bunch of people lined up. And I'm like, oh, shit. And he's like, we have to go to surgery now. She has a complete small bowel obstruction, and we need to operate immediately. So it went 0 to 100 really quick. And what an interesting kind of tidbit of information, her mom's best friend died in that very same hospital from a ruptured bowel in a surgery at that very same hospital, like 6 years prior. So in the back of her head and my head were, okay, they're acting very serious right now. They're like, we need to get into surgery right now. She had a complete bowel obstruction that was exacerbated by the psyllium husk that she had taken. And because psyllium husk swells so much, it pulls the moisture out of the bowels themselves. So it closes the bowels in, and it just completely cuts it off. And when that happens, it bursts the bowel, kind of goes outward with all the stuff backing up. And if you get a perforation in your bowel, it releases all those toxins into your system, and you can die within 10, 15 minutes. So it's a very serious situation when you have a complete total small bowel obstruction. They have to clear that bowel obstruction before any of your bowels perforate. So ironically, just before we were releasing InfiniFiber, my wife has to go in for emergency surgery because the psyllium husk she took was swelling and blocking her GI tract. So and that was probably what, 3-4 weeks before we released InfiniFiber?
Yeah.
So just before the release, and I'm like, how insanely ridiculous would it be if my wife died from taking psyllium husk 3-4 weeks before we released our fiber that wouldn't have that same issue?
Yeah.
But point being, like, this turned into a very personal thing for me. It was already personal for me because I knew I needed to take fiber seriously. I knew I wanted to make a fiber that would work well for people, be well tolerated, and not have any of the side effects. But I couldn't have predicted that that would happen so close and that it would become even more emotionally personal for me about trying to get people to take fiber seriously. So now I realize this is something that I need to do to get younger people, millennials, people in their 30s and 40s that probably aren't thinking, oh, I'm not the person that they're talking about when they say people need to take fiber seriously. I'll worry about that in 20 years. No, like everybody, and even in their 20s, 30s, 40s, needs to really start taking this seriously because it can go 0 to 100 very quickly. And a lot of people just don't realize the what fiber is doing in their diet. And if we can just get people to start realizing fiber in general is necessary in their diet, maybe we can prevent some of these unnecessary deaths from colon cancer and rectal cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a roundabout way. That was not about the formulation, but
But it is, right? Because I mean, it's a really great example of why we didn't choose to use psyllium husk and
Right.
InfiniFiber. That's like the most, extreme and like worst case
Yes.
scenario situation. But
And to be honest, in a lower dose, as a part of a bigger formulation, it would have worked well. I think
Right.
it also brings up the problem of taking a single fiber source because you could have something like this happen and it could actually not have the intended effects. Like, and we'll talk
Right.
about this a little bit later with microbial diversity. If you take multiple different fiber sources, you have more microbial diversity than if you take a single fiber source.
Right, and that's kind of the balance that you need to get from soluble, insoluble, fermentable, non-fermentable, and bringing it back to the formulation piece. I don't really see anybody out there talking about fiber in the way we are. Breaking it down simply enough into it's not good enough just to take more fiber. People have heard take more fiber, take more fiber. But they haven't heard the types of fiber that they should take, when they should take the fiber, how those fibers work, and have been explained really why. Like, why are we taking this fiber? And fiber exists in either soluble or insoluble, which is pretty easy to understand. It either is soluble in your GI tract or it stays insoluble. And then there's fermentable and non-fermentable, meaning when you see fermentable, that's a prebiotic fiber. It's going to go on and feed the probiotics in your system. And then non-fermentable provides structure and stool, and it also kind of sweeps out the GI tract. So you need a balanced amount of soluble, insoluble, fermentable, non-fermentable to keep the microbiome diverse and to keep the whole system working in the way that it should.
okay, so which is the
And
soluble fiber source then in this case in InfiniFiber?
So we have a bunch. I can just run through the formulation real quick here. So Solnol resistant potato starch is insoluble. It is
but
fermentable.
fermentable.
And that's where there's a bit of nuance too, because oftentimes fermentable, non-fermentable is not a part of the conversation. It's soluble, insoluble, with the assumption that all soluble fibers are fermentable and all non-soluble fibers are not fermentable, but that's not the case. The
Right.
nice thing with Solnol, though, is that it does resist fermentation a little bit. So it doesn't ferment right away in the proximal colon, so the first part of the colon. It waits until the distal colon, or it doesn't wait, it just takes a long time for it to get digested by the bacteria. And that's also really important because a lot of fiber supplements actually don't end up making it to the distal colon with enough fermentable fiber still present. Most of it gets
Right.
fermented early on and then causes gas and bloating. So that's also a good distinction to make. And actually also interesting with Solnol, it's not a classical fiber because it's actually a starch. But
Right.
it's a starch that we cannot digest. It has to be digested by our gut microbiome. And maybe that's also a good distinction to make with all of this. Fibers are basically carbohydrates that we are not able to process in a way to pull nutrition from it and use it, but specialized bacteria in our gut microbiome can and use it as food then.
Right.
So, anyways, that's solno, fermentable, non-soluble. Acacia fiber, that is pretty much non-soluble, non-fermentable for the most part.
No, no, acacia fiber is fermentable and
Okay.
soluble.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
We have a nice landing page.
You should check it out.
Yeah. I guess we could
It's
pull that up on the screen too.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be good because I think this is also one release where we did a much different strategy for the release. We spent a lot of time on the landing page to explain what this is, why, and how it works. And I think that's been one of our deficiencies over the past 13 years. We're very, very good at making the best products out there. Very few people will dispute that. We are not as good at convincing people why they should buy something or hand holding them in a way to get them to buy it. You probably notice a lot of our competitors, their web pages, their marketing, their branding is all very much salesy. It immediately starts trying to sell you on the supplement. We've never really done that. We've been, here's the facts, here's the data, here's the science, have at it. And then we're on to the next thing, right? It's kind of like squirrel, next supplement. And I think that really shows where my passion is. My passion is in the science, it's in the R&D, it's in the innovation. I don't like the marketing. I frankly don't like selling supplements. I would prefer to just do the innovation and the science piece in the background. So, and I think that shows with the way we've acted over the years. We've been very focused on making the coolest thing and then moving on to the next cool thing that we're making rather than taking a step back and going, let's explain to customers what this product is, why they should care, tell a story about it, and then explain in simple details why it's different than everything else. And I think we did a really good job with InfiniFiber on that, with the landing page. So,
And also, it's this product, InfiniFiber, has actually been so popular that we've had to restock it how many times?
Ooh,
yeah,
four
at least
times
four.
now?
At least four times. So, meaning like the products that are actually available to just grab on the shelf and send to you ran out four times, and we had to fill new bottles and create new stock four times. That's how popular it's been. So, I think the landing page and the new approach is really working. I mean, it's also really, it speaks to how important fiber is and how universal it is for people as well. But
Right.
I really do think that it's working. Let's take a look at the page.
Yeah. So if you scroll down on the landing page, we break it down pretty simply. It shows whether it's fermentable, non-fermentable, if it's slow, moderate, and whether it's soluble or insoluble. And I mean, we could go through each one, but essentially what the balance is a 50-50 balance between soluble and insoluble. We just went straight down the middle and said, we need both soluble and insoluble. Let's do a perfect balance between those two. But then we also said, okay, the bulk of the benefit that you're going to get from fiber are the fermentable fibers. And I don't want to say the bulk of the benefit, but the most interesting benefits that you will get from fiber are from the fermentables. So then we tip the scale towards fermentable, 75% fermentable, 25% non-fermentable. And a big part of that is the Solno, because it's both insoluble but fermentable. It continues the fermentable percentage, but keeps the soluble and insoluble ratio at 50-50. And the nice thing about that formulation is that it ferments along the entire colon. We spent a lot of time picking out different fiber sources that start fermenting quickly, like the apple pectin. But we kept that very small because when things ferment very quickly, that's when gas builds up. That's when you get the bloating. So we wanted some fermentable fiber in there that goes quick, but we didn't want a lot of it. So it's between 2 and 3% apple pectin. And then you go down the line of the different fibers and you get slower and slower fermenting fibers. But what that does is there are different probiotic species at different pieces of your GI tract. Like it's not all the same probiotics throughout your system. If you think about your GI tract as one thing, it's not an evenly distributed amount of the same species all over.
It's
There's
like a
different
village.
species along the way.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a village, like a neighborhood, You
But
got
it's
you got
almost like multiple villages.
yeah, and you've got maybe like a little pond here, and you've got some trees there, and the frogs like it over here, and there's a bit of mosquitoes happening or whatever. Yeah. So,
With very different specialized functions. And maybe just a really good just broad overview of what happens to the food we eat when we ingest it, goes down our throat, ends up in our stomach. There's a bunch of enzymes and acid there that breaks down the stuff that we can utilize. Then it enters as chyme, like a kind of squishy mash. It enters the intestines, and it travels all through the intestines, the small intestines, and it gets broken down into stuff that we are utilizing as fuel. But then as that's being done, more and more nutrients are being pulled out of the chyme. It's getting dehydrated a bit, but then the fibers stay there. So it makes it through the whole tract. And in this tract, there are also some bacterial species, even in our stomach as well, throughout the small intestine too. But there's not a whole lot. So there's not a whole lot of bacterial fermentation going on. And then at the end of this process, you have this ball of basically fiber that can be fermented by the bacteria, and then that enters into the proximal colon, which is also where you have the highest concentration of microbes. So fermentation can be very rapid and very complete there, actually, which is one of the issues with the gas and bloating, because if you basically have to almost think about it like you're growing mushrooms. If any of you have ever grown mushrooms or seen mushrooms grow, you have to inoculate it with a culture with your substrate. And all of the stuff that remains after digesting our food is the substrate that in the proximal colon we are inoculating with bacterial species that can then go to work. So that is
Right.
if that happens too rapidly, you get a lot of gas there in the proximal colon. It travels through the mid colon, and then it has to bend down into the distal colon, and that bend is kind of hard to do for gas. So that's where bloating occurs. And then if it does make it down that curve, then, well, you're farting. But that is kind of the basic process. And then now we can kind of talk mostly in the colon is where we're seeing a lot of the fermentation and different species that are more specialized for different types of fiber or not.
and to make it also quite simple, by the time the chyme reaches the colon, is it still chyme or is it then poop?
Yeah, it's kind of like an in-between stage.
Okay.
If you have norovirus, then yeah, it's all just going right through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oof,
I
rough.
just had norovirus, so
Yeah.
it's topical
I
again.
had it like a month or two ago.
That's rough.
Rough. Very rough.
Well, so the interesting thing about norovirus, I got it 2 years ago and I was just out. I actually had a mobile IV place come, and I was in bed, like shaking. This time I fought it off much quicker, but I was taking our new probiotics and I was taking InfiniGreens and InfiniFiber. So the beneficial bacteria in my system were more able to help me fight it off a lot quicker than I was 2 years ago, which is an interesting beta test that I hadn't planned on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I noticed it too. I actually was taking InfiniFiber when I was recovering from norovirus, and it definitely helped speed up the process. And,
And it had an anti-diarrheal effect, which was interesting.
exactly. It was really effective.
Yeah.
And part of that kind of illustrates why we did end up going for a 75% fermentable, 25% non-fermentable, because if you don't have that remaining structure, it's going to be very loose. And if you do have a lot of fermentable fibers that are just eating through everything, your poop is going to be very almost like soft serve ice cream, which is also not ideal. And then if you add some non-fermentable fibers to that mix, it bulks it up, it keeps it solid but soft, and that's really what you're going for. And then
Which helps the mechanical process too.
Yeah. And because it is softer and easier to pass, you're not making little indents throughout your colon, which are then called diverticulitis, right? Is what it's called. Yeah. So if your poop is softer, you have less issues with that too.
So I just thought of it. I hadn't thought about it before, but a good analogy for this, village feeding, a broad set. Imagine you have a village, of a bunch of people. Well, let's say a city, right? A city of people. And then there's some billionaires at the start of it. And then, there's a mixture of all sorts of other people throughout the city, actually making the city work. Now imagine if the food came in to the city right where the billionaires were and they ate it all, right? They ate all of the food before it could get further down. You would have a very unhealthy city, kind of like we have in the United States right now. But it's a good analogy, because if you're feeding if you have one type of fiber and you're just feeding the fast fermenting fibers early on in your colon, then you're not going to allow the probiotics that need that food later on. So developing InfiniFiber, is like solving the wealth inequality problem in the United States. We solve the wealth inequality issue, but in your guts. So because we thought out the process and said, okay, who's going to be fed? Where are they going to be fed? What do those ones eat? Like Solno, how do we resist the billionaires eating all the resources early on so that nobody gets them? Then it allows you to have a much more microbially diverse gastrointestinal tract. And microbial diversity in your gastrointestinal tract is one of the biggest predictors of general health. When you have a very non-diverse microbiome, you go through all sorts of different health problems, and including mood, depression, anxiety, all sorts of different things that are affected by the gut-brain axis are, go down if you don't have a diverse microbiome. And some of that is direct. Some of that is that some of the probiotics in your system make signaling molecules that go and do things in your brain and cause mood and cognition changes. But also, if you just feel bad, if your stomach feels bad, you're going to be depressed. Like you can't be motivated. You can't be energetic. You probably can't get out of the house if you're constantly having to go run to the bathroom. So even as a knock-on effect, you're going to have a lot of cognitive and mental deficits from your microbiome not being diverse.
Absolutely.
So just like out in the United States, where if there wasn't as much wealth inequality, I think we would have a healthier population in the United States. Same concept here in your gastrointestinal tract.
Absolutely. And when you have to focus on what's going on in your gastrointestinal tract, like when you have norovirus and you're just having diarrhea and everything's running right through you, it's exhausting and you can't absorb any of those nutrients. But even on like a slightly less extreme scale, if you're having lots of bloating or you're having lots of gas on a daily basis, it's so distracting. It makes it hard to focus. It makes it hard to just have a normal conversation with people. There's something in the back of your mind where you just kind of have to be bracing for, you don't want to be farting when you're talking to somebody, or if you're giving a presentation
or worse.
Or worse, or or you're recording something. Like this is not a way to go through life. Like it's really inconvenient and it's very uncomfortable, and it is indicative of probably a bigger issue within your GI tract or perhaps within your diet. And I definitely notice a mood boost when I take InfiniFiber, but it's also just amazing the lack of discomfort. Like I notice the lack of discomfort because I also struggle with gastrointestinal discomfort quite frequently, and just the absence of discomfort is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and you take it for granted, right?
Yes.
When our bodies are very good at like making us forget the bad times so that we can continue on, and keep on keeping on. So when you haven't had a bad time in a while, you can forget how bad it is. And, sometimes having to go through a bad time again makes you remember and go, oh shit, I need to take, not take any of this stuff for granted. And when you have gastrointestinal problems and you don't feel confident, you feel down. And what's the saying? There's two groups of people that admit to shitting their pants and liars.
Amazing.
If you have norovirus, you're not going to go out to a party amongst other people and then risk shitting your pants in front of people.
Yeah.
So even taking out the factors of you're not absorbing the nutrients, your gut-brain axis is thrown off, just the mental aspect of I can't go do the things I normally do. Now imagine that but your whole life. Somebody with IBD, somebody with Crohn's disease, somebody with these more serious, actual chronic diseases, how that affects their mood and mental state over long periods.
Yeah, it's very debilitating.
I can't imagine it, because when I get really bad gastrointestinal problems, I think I'm getting like a view into what their whole life is. And you think about it like, man, they've got to really be strong to keep pushing forward if this is their whole life and they never get any respite.
Yeah, I saw it with my mom a few years ago. She ate a bad cheese and it gave her some sort of bacterial infection that was then causing diarrhea for a few weeks. And then she went to the doctor. She was given an antibiotic that then killed everything except for one of the species that actually causes diarrhea. And then that just kicked off like a year-long battle with like daily diarrhea, and it did such a number on her. And like
And
she
it's
lived like,
crazy.
yeah. Oh
Doctors
yeah.
don't know what they're doing. Like you
Yeah.
go to the doctor and you have these things. You're like, all right, here's your antibiotic, causing more problems because they don't understand how antibiotics work. They don't understand the microbiome. They don't understand the holistic view of us as an organism.
Yeah.
And I see it over and over and over in my family and my friends. Like, I went to the doctor and did this, and now I'm worse. And it's like, well, yeah. Are you on a probiotic? Did he even tell you to take a probiotic when you're on your antibiotics so that you can reintroduce good bacteria? Like, no. Like, how often do you get put on antibiotics by a doctor and then they just don't mention probiotics or prebiotic fiber at all?
Yeah,
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You should always be
it-
taking
it-
probiotics.
and it's kind of a pervasive thought in the United States and probably all over the world. We treat symptoms, we don't treat problems, right? You go into a doctor, you say, I'm having this symptom. They give you a drug to treat that symptom. They don't take a step back and go, well, what's causing the symptom? You know, you're a complex organism. What is causing this symptom? And maybe we should go direct to the cause rather than trying to mask the symptom itself.
I do
And
want
I
to tell
see
you a
it
little.
over and over.
I want to tell you a little an anecdote about a recent experience I had at the doctor here in the Netherlands, because actually it is extremely different, which is amazing and also can be frustrating in different ways. But the approach from this doctor, and I think probably a lot of doctors in the Netherlands, is actually to educate you on what is happening in your body and why. And I went in because one of my tonsils was looking quite large, and I noticed it at one point, and I had been having a cold for a little while, and I was worried. I thought maybe I had tonsillitis. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to have it removed. I don't know what that entails. So I went in and I was pretty concerned, and she took a look. And then we just sat there and she was explaining to me in Dutch what was happening with my tonsil and why it was enlarged, and the fact that it's enlarged because the tonsil is the first step of defense against bacteria before it actually goes into your lungs. So the tonsil being enlarged is actually a good thing because it means it's working really hard. And if the tonsil isn't able to basically capture that intruder and fight it off, then it actually does go further into your lungs, and that's when you can develop other issues or an infection or something that's going to last longer and needs different kinds of intervention. But then she also said the reason why the tonsil is big is because it's working, and it's actually going to stay big probably for a couple of months. So the fact that it's big and it's been that way for a couple of weeks is actually nothing to be worried about, and it's not going to get smaller anytime soon. It might even take 3 or 4 months. And let's say you get another cold. I work with children, so I also am being exposed to tons of bacteria and colds and sicknesses all the time. So she says, okay, you're going to school, you're going to get exposed to other kinds of bacteria, you get another cold. Maybe the tonsil will be able to help fight it off, or maybe not. But in the case that you decide you want to actually remove that tonsil, now you're just removing the barrier between you and all of these bacteria and sicknesses and viruses that are trying to get in, and you might actually make the problem much, much worse. Not only
Right.
that, but I also told her, yeah, I work with kids and I also sing. I'm a music teacher. And she says, yeah, if you get surgery, this is going to completely change what's going on in your vocal cords. You're going to have to recover. It's going to take a long time. All of this stuff. And at the end of the appointment, I wasn't prescribed anything. I didn't
Right.
receive anything. She told me, this is what's going on. This is how your body works. It's doing what it's supposed to do. If you're having really big issues, you know, you could take a painkiller, but basically there's nothing to
Let
worry
it work.
about. Let it work, let it do its thing, and see you later. I got to get to the next patient because the healthcare system is very
Yeah.
overloaded here. It's just a different issue, a different conversation. But it was amazing because I thought, hey, I would have never known that. When I look on Google to
Yeah.
see why is this happening, it tells me you have tonsillitis, you're gonna have surgery, it's coming from a disease, all these different things that I get worried and I tell Emil, and Emil's like, and I always thought he was being so insensitive in the past. I'm like, I mean, I love this guy and I know he loves me too, but there are some things where I just don't get it. It's like he doesn't care. But maybe it's because you grew up in an environment where healthcare is actually a little more about educating. And,
Yeah.
I think there are some situations where that is detrimental, like where there needs to be a very quick and immediate intervention. But understanding that your body is just doing what it's supposed to, this is really helpful. It gives you a lot of peace of mind. It
Yeah.
makes you feel more confident. It makes you feel like, okay, I don't have to, quarantine myself or stay home, or I don't have to stop singing, or I don't have to like take all these extreme measures, change my lifestyle. I can keep going and I can just let my body do what it's going to do.
Right. Well, and I'm the same with my wife. Like she freaks out and goes, "Oh," I'm like, "No, it's fine. You'll be fine." And I think access to AI is probably going to help that too, because you'll be able to get quick, "Hey, this is what I'm feeling," and I go, "Oh no, don't worry," or "Hey, this is serious. You need to go in and you need to tell the doctor this." But I know I've heard, Emil, you talk about it multiple times before when we talk about immune function and we talk about when you're getting sick. You want some of the inflammation to stay.
Yes.
You don't want to take so many anti-inflammatories and so many things that mask the symptoms that it actually prevents your body from being able to fight off the infection.
Yeah.
And I think the system in the United States, particularly, is so concentrated on I feel bad, make me not feel bad, that you don't think about, well, does that thing you're taking to not feel bad actually make the situation worse or draw it out longer because you're preventing one of the mechanisms from that your body has for fighting off the infection.
And it reminds me of a quote from The Princess Bride, which is, "Life is pain," because like if you can't feel it and you don't have access to at least your sensation of what's going on, then your body might not be doing all the things that it could do to help you fix
Right.
it. So yeah, we do have to have a level of discomfort, unfortunately, but it's just how it is.
And we have a saying here, which is just out Zika, which means just let your sickness run its course. Your body knows
Yeah.
what to do most of the time, unless you get in a really bad scenario. Of course, you need some intervention, but for most of it, your body can take care of it. And like you're saying, whenever we get sick, and especially if we have a bit of a fever, I never try and take ibuprofen. I will like go and take a warm shower, lean into that, like my body
Yeah.
temperature going up within reason, of course, but your body temperature going up is a mechanism to fight what's going on in your body, that inflammation, the oxidative storm. If you then start taking a bunch of antioxidants, a bunch of anti-inflammatories, you're kind of hindering that process.
You mentioned the tonsil thing where, worried about having to have your tonsil out. And then if you take your tonsils out, then you've removed that defense mechanism that your body has built up over millions of years. Ironically, that I resonate with that because when I was about 10 years old, I got what they thought was appendicitis. So I had tons of pain. We went into the hospital. They said, he's got appendicitis. We need to get in there and take his appendix out. So I'm 10 years old. I go under. And when they put me on the operating table, they cut in and they got to my appendix. My appendix was fine, perfectly healthy, no problem. What had actually been happening is I had a respiratory sickness and I was swallowing the mucus. So instead of blowing my nose often or, spitting it out, I was 10. I didn't realize, oh, don't swallow that mucus that keeps draining down your throat. So I got a stomach infection from the infected mucus that I was swallowing. They thought it was appendicitis. They cut in. They realized it wasn't appendicitis. And in a sane world, what do you think would be done? They'd be like, oh, we were wrong. Wasn't appendicitis. What do you think they actually did?
They took it out.
Well, let's just take it out just to be safe because it doesn't have a use. There's no reason for him to have an appendix. We're already in here. Let's just take it. So they took my appendix out when I was 10 for no reason. Like, they literally just took one of my organs for no reason.
That's messed up.
Back then in the 90s, everyone's like, well, it doesn't have use, whatever. And I was 10. I didn't know any better. Well, fast forward a while, I was flying all over the world teaching. Before I started this company, I was actually a teacher. I would teach telecommunications, and I would fly all over the world, including India. So on one trip, I flew to Gurgaon, India, and it was the rainy season there, and I was there, and I got very, very sick. I almost died in India. So I got super sick, and one morning I woke up, and I couldn't even really move. So I rolled over to the hotel phone. I called one of my students, and I said, I'm not going to make it in today. And I think he heard on the phone how bad I was. So they actually came to my hotel room. They knocked on the door. I opened it, and he took one look at me, and he says, we need to get you to the hospital. So he rushed me to the hospital. We get into this Indian hospital, and it's just packed full of people. It's chaos. It's India. And I was there maybe 10 minutes, and I think they said, we have an American. And then I got priority. They didn't want an American to die in their hospital. And within like 30 seconds of the doctor coming and taking my vitals, the last thing I remember is him saying, your heart's about to stop. And then I blacked out. And then I woke up in an Indian hospital bed with IVs, Indian nurses around me that only spoke Hindi. Nobody spoke English. And I'm just like, oh God. So,
Whoa.
and I was sick for 6 months. I had a stomach issue, but then a respiratory thing. And when I got back to the United States, they thought maybe I had tuberculosis. They actually took my passport from me so that I couldn't travel until they determined whether I had tuberculosis or not. And then that was negative. And then they're like, well, maybe you got HIV from the needles in the Indian hospital. So then they had to do a HIV test, which is a very unnerving thing to hear. Oh, maybe I got HIV at a dirty needle Indian hospital.
Yeah.
And eventually my body fought it off, but my immune system was never the same since that time. And I would get sick 7-8 times a year, and like in bed, shivering, horrible sick. So I went to see an immunologist and to try and figure out what the hell was going on. We never figured out what I actually got in India, but what we did figure out is what happened was that initial sickness was whatever it was, but when I was put into the hospital bed there, they gave me extremely potent IV antibiotics. That completely destroyed my microbiome. Now we're starting to learn, what does the appendix do? Oh, it's not just an organ that your body puts together and has in there for no reason. It actually has a purpose. Its purpose is as a storage of your probiotics so that if your probiotics get destroyed in your system, they can be reintroduced. So it's kind of like it's a Helms Deep for your microbiome. You know, it can all go behind the walls of Helms Deep, and you know, I'm doing another analogy of Lord of the Rings, but it's where your microbiome can, you know, stay protected so that if something happens, antibiotics, whatever, destroys your microbiome, it'll reintroduce your normal microbiome back into your system.
Wow.
Because I didn't have an appendix, I couldn't have that. So
Yeah.
my bout in India destroyed my entire microbiome, and then there was nothing to reintroduce it. And at the time, I didn't know what I know now about the microbiome. So this immunologist said, look, you completely destroyed your microbiome. You have to try and rebuild it. It's going to be hard because most probiotics get destroyed in your system. And even the probiotics you get that are really good are what, 8, maybe 10 strains. Your old microbiome was hundreds or thousands of strains, and it got destroyed. So getting it back to that diversity that you had before is going to be difficult, if not impossible. So, and I've told this story before on Reddit. That's where I found Epicor, the fermented yeast product. I started taking Epicor. I started taking VSL3, which is a probiotic, which is now Viscbiome. And I started slowly rebuilding my microbiome. But that happened because some rando doctors in America said, hey, this 10-year-old's, let's just take his appendix for no reason. And then now for the rest of my life, I have to be a little bit careful with my microbiome because I no longer have that organ that protects it.
It's amazing. I had no idea. I've never heard this about the appendix.
It's like
Not
Yeah,
once.
it's like a backup drive.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This
yeah.
is yeah, thank you for telling
It's
us.
the Helms Deep of your GI tract.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so this is totally new information, incredible. Also so messed up that you have no appendix, but it also gives a little bit more depth into like just how important this InfiniFiber really is for us because like I didn't know this about you, but I mean for anyone who's experienced something like this, something to this effect, or who's had issues with your microbiome, with your GI tract, maybe you don't have an appendix either. It's just another
Right.
reason to take care of your microbiome by taking fiber.
Maybe maybe an American doctor stole one of your organs too when you were 10 years old.
Yeah, who knows?
It's
What are you
really
missing?
fucked up, right?
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
It's
nuts.
it's really crazy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't say that I'm so surprised, but it is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if an American doctor may have taken your appendix, call 1-800-InfiniFiber. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
But shall we just check one more time to look at the formulation? Have we missed anything? Are we like, because we talked
Well,
about soluble and non-soluble.
we haven't talked about viscous and non-viscous. That is also an important part. So what you were mentioning earlier with psyllium husk and it getting very thick,
Yeah.
it gets thick because it is viscous. So that's another classification for fibers. And we do have a few viscous fibers in InfiniFiber. Apple pectin is viscous, fenugreek is viscous, and then chia seed is viscous. And I believe a few others are a little bit viscous, but those are the primary viscous ones. And what's
But
important,
we kept it more balanced.
yeah, we didn't want it to swell too much, and you can let it sit for a while, and it doesn't turn into a pudding. And but the important thing about viscous fibers is that in the stomach, when we're digesting food, a bunch of bile acids get released, and that does part of the breakdown of all of the food that's in your stomach. But what these viscous fibers do is they attach themselves to the bile acids and they prevent their reuptake. And because the bile acids are being synthesized from cholesterol and they're not being taken up again after eating and after having a big release of bile acids, it means we have to produce new bile acids. And since those bile acids are made from cholesterol, viscous fibers can actually reduce overall cholesterol levels. So that's a really interesting aspect of fibers. And I think something not a lot of people know about the fact that
No.
just the viscosity and through that very unique pathway, you can actually decrease your cholesterol levels.
Really
We
interesting.
didn't even know it until
Yeah.
just before the launch of InfiniFiber, where you're like, hey, there's this whole other aspect, viscosity, that we need to take into consideration.
Yeah.
And cholesterol is another issue, like high cholesterol is another issue that I consider to be an old person's problem. But I mean, it's also probably not, and
Nah.
yeah, good to know. And
That's also something I'm dealing with too. I haven't gone to a doctor in a long time. I probably should. I'm too busy. I've built a way too complex of an organization that takes up too much of my time. So unfortunately, I don't spend enough time making sure that I'm good, that I'm okay, and doing the stuff for me. So I haven't seen a doctor in a while, and I'm like, Function Health came out. I want to be able to comment on it with customers, and I also want to kind of see how the process goes and just do all the blood markers. So I actually went in and signed up for Function Health, and then did like all of the extra panels. Like Function Health is, I think, like $300 now a year, but then you can add on thousands and thousands of dollars of panels where it goes through all sorts of different markers. So I did all those, went in and got them tested, and the results of that were kind of alarming for me, to be honest. My total cholesterol was way too high. My LDL and HDL were off. My lipoproteins were off. Like a lot. My cholesterol was just way out of whack. So, and again, I'm 40. It's about that time to start thinking, all right, I got to start thinking like an adult now and treating things a little bit more seriously. I may not feel like I'm old, but the passage of time, it takes us all in the same rate. So I really realized with the function health testing, with all this fiber research, that I really have to start taking it seriously now and laying the groundwork for me getting into my 50s and 60s and 70s, so that if I take a little bit of time now and educate myself now so that I understand all of this stuff and force myself to take it seriously, if I don't do that, I'm going to regret it later. So I'm dealing with the high cholesterol thing right now. So berberine, we developed as a supplement to help with that. The fish oils, but also InfiniFiber itself can help with the cholesterol, not just bringing total cholesterol down, but improving the ratio of LDL and HDL.
Yeah.
And as you get into cholesterol, it's way more complex. Like I always tell people on Reddit this, once you start going down a pathway, it's always way, way, way more complex than you think on the surface.
Yeah.
Cholesterol is that way. Just like viscosity and soluble, insoluble, fermentable, non-fermentable, the cholesterol has different particle sizes. It has all sorts of different inflammation markers that go along with it. So as you really dive into the complexity of cholesterol, it opens up this whole new world of understanding what cholesterol is, what it does, all the systems that it touches. Testosterone is very dependent on cholesterol. There's lots of things that are really dependent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were just dealing with that with vitamin D right now. How is the cholesterol extracted and made?
Yeah. And that's actually a really interesting mechanism. When your skin gets hit by sunlight, the UVB actually transforms the cholesterol in your skin to vitamin D. So, yeah.
Right. And that's how it happens in mushrooms too. But it's ergocalciferol that gets created, not cholecalciferol. But so when you think about humans, cholesterol is what we use. Mushrooms are very closely related to humans, but they use ergosterol. So it's the exact same process. You get hit with UV light as a mushroom, your ergosterol converts to ergocalciferol, vitamin D2.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting. But a lot of people don't realize we're not just trying to take fiber to not get colon cancer. We're not just taking fiber to be regular. We're taking fiber to improve our metabolic health, to improve cholesterol parameters, a lot of the way it does that is through the short chain fatty acids that get created. I think that's another unique aspect that we want to touch on. The short chain fatty acid production profile. We saw that a lot of the fiber supplements on the market were very imbalanced towards acetate. So the short chain fatty acid that gets produced the most was acetate, and propionate was the smallest. We wanted to come out with a fiber that got it a little bit more balanced and had a higher amount of propionate to acetate ratio.
And why, actually?
First of all, for those not aware what acetate is, it's vinegar, so acetic acid. So you consume quite a lot of that through your diet as well. I think that's a much easier one. Propionate and butyrate are a little bit harder to obtain. Those are coming mostly through bacterial fermentation. And I think the reason we focused on propionate and butyrate as well is because they have really interesting effects. Specifically, what I'm interested in is their neurological effects. So you see that butyrate and propionate, they can upregulate the enzymes responsible for neurotransmitter function. So both propionate and butyrate upregulate tryptophan hydroxylase, which creates serotonin, and tyrosine hydroxylase, which creates dopamine. So that was a big reason. Acetate is also
that's part of the gut-brain axis.
Exactly. I think those are really the messenger molecules because they're getting created in our gut, they're entering circulation, and they pass the blood-brain barrier very easily and very rapidly as well. So I think that's where a lot of these mood-boosting effects of fiber are coming from as well. And actually, if you look at the stool samples of people with mood disorders, you see very low amounts of short-chain fatty acids in their stool, which is indicative that they're just not producing that and not kicking up these upstream pathways where neurotransmitters are getting synthesized.
And this is making me think about your blog, your InfiniFiber blog. So if anyone's curious to read even more in depth and really just take your time with all of this information, you can also just read about InfiniFiber and the process of formulation and also just this breakdown of all the different ingredients on our website. But you mentioned the importance of butyrate, and this is something that stands out to me because I know what butyric acid is, and when I can read something and I know what it is, it makes me feel really proud because I'm not doing hours long research every day. But I do want to get in a little bit and ask you, what is the significance of butyrate then in this whole process, and how does InfiniFiber interact with butyrate?
Well, so butyrate is being produced from InfiniFibers. So
Okay.
when the bacteria munch on the fibers and digest them, the thing that they're producing as a breakdown, as a metabolite, are the short chain fatty acids. And so
It's called a postbiotic. So a prebiotic is the food that the biotics eat. A postbiotic is what those probiotics are making, the metabolites of the eating.
Okay, so butyrate is then the metabolite.
yeah,
Okay.
it's basically
One of them.
yeah.
One of them.
You could see it like in a crude way, the poop of the bacteria.
Sure.
Like it is a waste product that is no longer useful for them, but it is actually useful for us, and we absorb it into circulation.
Okay.
But not all of the fiber types can convert into all of the different short chain fatty acids. So you might have ones that are more easily fermentable to produce acetate, vinegar, or more propionic acid or butyric acid.
That was going to be my next question. The difference between butyric acid and butyrate.
It's the same thing, just a different naming.
Yeah, same thing.
Okay.
And to your original question, what is butyrate doing? Why do we care? The short chain fatty acid that improves gut barrier health, repair of your gut barrier, is butyrate. So butyrate is the primary short chain fatty acid that helps repair the gut lining.
Okay.
And this is also one of the reasons why we wanted the butyrate production and just general short chain fatty acid production to be spread out through the whole colon, because if you're only producing butyrate in the proximal colon, you're only going to get those benefits there.
Okay.
But a really big issue with colorectal cancers is actually the lack of short chain fatty acids in the distal colon, which is one of the reasons we focused on slower fermenting fibers so that we can enrich the short chain fatty acid pool more there.
If we go back to the city analogy, the economy of the city runs by all of its citizens producing something. If all of the food is going to the billionaires, and the billionaires are only producing one thing, let's say AI companies right now, it seems, that's not really a healthy economy, right? It's just all AI companies, and there's no manufacturing, there's no, healthcare jobs, there's no people paving roads, and all of the stuff that's happening with the rest of the people in the city. Those people aren't getting fed. The economy starts breaking down, the system starts breaking down, the city becomes sick and doesn't work, which is what we're seeing in the United States. So same thing here. If you can feed all the different probiotics along the entire system, your system as a whole is going to be healthier. They're going to have the tools or the metabolites, the short chain fatty acids, to then repair their house, to make their environment around them healthier and better. And then the whole city, the whole system, the whole GI tract then is healthier. And consequently, you, as an organism that requires your GI tract to be able to absorb nutrients, is healthier. It's a good analogy, I think. I didn't think of it until we started talking on this podcast, but it's a very similar thing. Like when you think about your GI tract, think about it like a city, and if all of the resources are going to a select few, it's not going to be a healthy city. Same thing here.
And I have a question about the neurotransmitters that you're talking about, dopamine and serotonin, right? Are those only being produced from processes that are happening in the stomach, or is this also happening throughout the entire GI tract? Do you know?
Well, so the short chain fatty acids and the fibers are not actually creating serotonin. They are upregulating enzymes that kick up serotonin production. So, for example, tryptophan hydroxylase gets upregulated. From the proteins that we eat, those contain L-tryptophan as one of the amino acids. So that gets broken down during normal digestion. It gets absorbed, it makes it to the brain, and then because of that tryptophan hydroxylase enzyme. Tryptophan hydroxylase gets turned into 5-HTP, 5-hydroxytryptophan, and then 5-hydroxytryptophan gets turned into serotonin. But that enzyme is present in relatively small amounts compared to the amount of L-tryptophan that we're getting. So we call it a rate-limiting enzyme. So,
And then the serotonin becomes melatonin, which then signals your circadian rhythm, and it's all a cycle.
yes.
Okay.
So if you really want to optimize serotonin production, one thing you would do is maybe take another protein shake or just take an L-tryptophan capsule, which is what we do. And then that L-tryptophan combined with the short chain fatty acids from InfiniFiber will increase the propensity of your body to create serotonin from that L-tryptophan. It increases the capacity. So that is how they're interacting. But the interesting thing is our gut bacteria can actually also create serotonin and GABA and glutamate. And I'm not sure about dopamine, but also probably.
It can.
Yeah.
Yep. But the thing with peripherally synthesized or peripherally created neurotransmitters, they can't pass the blood-brain barrier. So those neurotransmitters, even though they're mostly neurotransmitters having functions in your brain, they also have functions peripherally. So digestion is actually controlled by serotonin in part. So as you make more peripheral serotonin, it affects the way your body digests. So it really is a cycle that your body wants to maintain homeostasis. Your body wants to maintain balance. So anywhere you look, the deeper you look, it's always a homeostatic kind of response. This gets created, this happens, a compensatory mechanism happens to try and bring it back into balance. The same thing is happening with this, except it's not you doing it, it's millions, billions of different bacteria all working symbiotically with your system.
Yeah. And again,
it's really cool.
Yeah,
Very cool.
The more we're looking into this, the more I realize like this is the real thing you need to tackle. Your microbiome needs to be in tip-top shape because if it isn't, all of the other things we're doing aren't going to be nearly as effective. Because ever since we started taking the InfiniFiber, I've felt like I'm in a much better mood. I'm also a bit more focused. My sleep seems to have improved a little bit. And we have been spending a lot of attention on our gut microbiome. We eat a lot of fermented foods. We are making sure to eat enough dietary fiber. And once we started doing that, I saw our mood go up. And now it's going up even more. So there's definitely a big connection there.
Absolutely. And when you were talking about the production of serotonin and dopamine through a healthier microbiome, it was making me think about our last podcast episode, which was all about focus and the neurotransmitters that contribute to a state of focus. And it makes sense that when your GI tract is healthy and your microbiome has everything that it needs, that you are going to be creating these neurotransmitters that you can access when it's time to really focus. So it's not only just going to help your digestion, but it's also going to help your mood and your ability to focus. And I've noticed over the last couple of weeks, the last few months, since we've focused more on our microbiome, I have more energy. I feel more motivated to go exercise. So I've been exercising more. This is also super important for all of these processes.
Oh, and before I forget, the short chain fatty acids also increase anabolism. They can enhance muscle growth. So there's also some interesting research on that. And I swear, since we've been taking the InfiniFiber, my lifts have gone up significantly in the gym and I'm showing more lean muscle mass. And you've commented on it a few times too. And it's interesting because I was thinking we do about the same workout. I haven't really changed anything else except the InfiniFiber. Is it really having that big of an impact? Maybe.
Amazing.
No, it is. Like the other thing we're developing right now, which I'd mentioned it on Reddit, so it's not a secret, but we're developing 2 new probiotics. So one of them is a core probiotic, a general probiotic that you would take just for general health. And then we're developing a performance probiotic that are meant to be taken together, or you can just take the core, or you could just take the performance. But one of our partners in Taiwan, they're the seventh largest probiotic manufacturer in the world, and they're doing really, really novel probiotic research. So they're getting very specific into strains into what those strains are doing, and they're looking at it in a way that I think a lot of others aren't. So they have research out there on specific probiotic strains improving muscle mass, improving VO2 max, improving all of the stuff that you would want to improve in the gym or if you're an athlete. And a lot of people don't think about that, right? And there's research out there now where they take stool samples from Olympic athletes. Their microbiome is very different than somebody that is sedentary. And they've actually done this research where they've taken a fecal sample from an Olympic level athlete, and they put it they did a fecal transplant into somebody that was sedentary, that wasn't athletic, and they became more athletic just by those probiotics being put into their system. They've done it the opposite way too, which I wouldn't want to be the athlete on the other end of that study, but they've taken a sedentary person's stool and implanted it into somebody that was more athletic, and they became less athletic. So this idea that our microbiome is controlling more about who we are is going to become more and more prevalent as more and more research comes out. And I think people are going to be very surprised at that, because everybody likes to think I'm muscular, I'm athletic just because I put in the hard work. And don't get me wrong, it is a lot of hard work. At one point, I got down to 7% body fat and was working out 3 hours every day. So I know how much work it takes to get to a high level of fitness. But there is this underlying genetic piece that I think everybody realizes. Some people have better genetics for muscle growth than myostatin expression and all these different things. But a lot of people aren't talking about the microbiome. Some people's microbiome is just more suited to having an easier time being more athletic. And I think it's making a bigger difference than a lot of people realize. And some of these conversations might become a little uncomfortable too, because the same goes for cognition, for mood, for memory. Some people might be more naturally predisposed to a better cognition because of their microbiome, because when they were born, as they were growing up, they got a more diverse set of bacteria that is now helping them to have maybe an easier time memorizing things or having a higher IQ or cognition. Yeah. So this research into what is the microbiome doing, all of the body systems that it's affecting, I think is going to make huge advancements in people's quality of life.
And it really reminds me of one of the most buff people I've ever talked to on the Nootropics Depot podcast, and that was Joshua on the...
Well, maybe Greg.
Well, that's what I'm saying. One of, not the most. Don't worry, Greg. But Joshua is also super buff and obsessed with the microbiome and is like a really wonderful example of this. But yeah, Emiel was showing me pictures of Joshua like doing some crazy calisthenic poses, and I was like, oh wow, this dude is super strong. But he's obsessed with the microbiome and has done so much research, and I learned so much from that podcast, talking about biofilms and talking about just how desperately important it is that we focus on the microbiome when considering just health overall. And I'd be really curious to just even ask him now at this point, knowing what we know, like, when did he start to notice that connection between a healthy microbiome and muscle growth? Because we didn't get into that on the podcast itself, but I mean, he's a great example of someone like he's definitely knows what's going on, and there's a connection there for sure.
And this is where education can come in to get people excited about fiber, about the microbiome. Because that was one thing I know, Emiel, on our new product calls where we were talking about InfiniFiber, I'm like, we can finally make fiber exciting. Yeah. We can finally get people realizing this isn't just an old person's metamucil thing. This is a really interesting thing for biohackers, for nootropics enthusiasts, for the people that are really trying to optimize themselves. They should be treating fiber like they are treating the more novel nootropics that we've released.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, also from the building up muscle, if you have low microbial diversity and you don't have many short chain fatty acids, your metabolism is also going to be dysregulated, which is going to cause you to actually gain quite a lot of weight. And there's a lot of theories that obesity might actually be like a microbiome issue. And if you fix your microbiome, you actually might fix the issue of gaining too much weight. And part of that is probably down to Akkermansia. So that's one thing we haven't talked about, but Akkermansia is this bacteria that produces GLP-1 like compounds and
No, it
controls.
produces GLP-1.
Oh yeah, it just straight up GLP-1.
Yeah.
And because of that, you don't get as hungry as quickly, you lose some more weight, and of course, also the fiber swelling up and taking up space in your stomach has a satiating effect. So that is something we haven't even touched on yet. But when you eat a big breakfast or a big lunch or dinner and then take a scoop of or two scoops of InfiniFiber, you will feel full for basically the whole day. And that's what I did
And
today.
I would do it before. What I usually do is I take Infinigreens and InfiniFiber before I eat.
Okay.
That way it starts to swell up and I start feeling more full sooner so that I don't overeat.
Okay. That makes sense too.
It kind of prevents it. But on the Akkermansia front and this idea of the microbiome affecting obesity, I think research is going to start coming out that that's exactly what's going on. So, and I've talked about this on Lance Strayer's radio show that I go on. Actually, I think I'm going on this weekend. Yeah, I'm going on his radio show again this weekend. So the idea of we've talked about TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, a lot, and how I think it's absolutely batshit fucking and crazy that every man over 40 in the United States somehow is broken and can't make their own testosterone, so they have to replace it and get on.
And a lot of men under 40 too.
Yeah. Like
yeah,
your
it's
brother.
crazy. All of my friends, everybody I know, I'm 40 now, so a lot of my friends are in that time period. They go into the doctor, they immediately start pushing TRT. Every single one of my friends. It's fucking insane, because what that is telling everybody that goes into their doctor, you're broken. Yeah, you're 40 now, you're broken, you can't make testosterone anymore, we got to start replacing it. Good thing these pharmaceutical companies are here, or else you'd just be a soy boy that can't build muscle anymore. Like you're teaching, subconsciously or consciously that these men are broken and the pharmaceutical industry is here to fix them. And it's crazy. So the same is kind of going on right now with GLP-1 drugs, right? We've systemically destroyed people's microbiome over the last 40 years of shitty food, overuse of antibiotics, all sorts of different factors, at least in the United States, that have just ruined everybody's health. And what's happened over that time? Obesity rates have ballooned up. And then now the body positivity movement has come out and tried to be like, well, no, actually, that's healthy. And it's not. It's not fucking healthy. If you're obese, you are going to die earlier, period. That's just, it is what it is. And trying to convince yourself otherwise is only hurting you. So, but it's not your fault, because the system has failed you. Our system of factory farming, of taking all the nutrients out of our foods, processing them, it's destroying the microbiome, and this destruction of the microbiome is rapidly increasing obesity rates, and it's because of GLP-1. We naturally produce GLP-1. So it's very similar to TRT in that, okay, you're not producing enough GLP-1, you're overweight, you're obese, let's get you on Mounjaro or Wegovy, and we'll just replace your GLP-1. We'll just inject you with a GLP-1 agonist, and then that'll do it for you. And I think it's going to be just as crazy in 10, 20 years when we look back at this and go, what the fuck were we thinking? Why did we not try and improve people's microbiomes so that they could naturally produce more GLP-1, so that they wouldn't need to become dependent on these drugs that bypass your body's systems? And Akkermansia is a big part of that. So the Solnol in InfiniFiber is perfectly suited to feed Akkermansia in the distal colon. And Akkermansia is the primary species in your GI tract that produces GLP-1. So if you can get more Akkermansia in your system, your body will make more GLP-1, which will then go on throughout your whole system and allow you to be able to burn fat easier, to have your cholesterol levels come down. It will do all the things that these GLP-1 drugs are doing, but it'll do it more naturally. And it's not going to be like injecting Mounjaro. It's not going to be, like taking tirzepatide. Those are very, very, very effective drugs at what they do, but they are drugs that are bypassing all of these systems in your body that I think is crazy to jump right to right away. I think doctors should look more holistically, like you were saying, educate people and go, we could get you on this if you're morbidly obese. Like, hey, we need to have an intervention right now and correct this, or you are going to die in 5 years. Those sorts of things, the drugs are absolutely necessary for that. And I think they're very good for that and they're suited for that. But somebody that's just somewhat overweight going into their doctor and it's like, let's get you on Wegovy, is just as crazy to me as a 40-year-old going in and going, oh, well, your testosterone's only at 400. Let's get you on TRT for the rest of your life. It's the same level of insanity in my head.
Absolutely. And I mean, the obvious reason why it's happening is because there's so much money on the table. And if you can convince people from a young age that they have to be on TRT, or they have to be on a GLP-1, or they have to be on birth control, or they have to be on an antidepressant. Sorry, now we're really going there. Yeah, then you get to sell that to them for their whole life. But that's the really big difference between pharmaceutical companies and Nootropics Depot. We're not a pharmaceutical company. And the point that you're making about the fact that these drugs are bypassing processes that are actually happening in your body, that the drugs wouldn't exist if we didn't know the processes that are happening in our own bodies. Right. First, we had to learn what's happening in our own body. And then there are smart people who figured out, hey, we can create something that actually bypasses this, that we can just give to people and sell to people. But
and that's more recent, though.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of people should realize is the pharmaceutical industry, until very recently, was not as mechanistic as that. Meaning, a lot of these drugs were discovered by accident. They were testing them for some other thing, and they're like, hey, these people are losing weight. Let's get it approved for that. They didn't go in and go, here is the mechanism, here's how it's working. Now with AI, with the tools that we have now, the docking studies and all of the more enhanced tools that we have in the last 10 years, pharmaceutical companies are getting more intelligent about, okay, this drug worked for this. Let's figure out the mechanism. Let's find something else that has that mechanism, but better. They're doing that now. But for the last 50 years, it was kind of like, hey, we know this works. We don't know how it works, but it's approved. Prescribe it. And I think especially the older generation has put more stake into the pharmaceutical industry than I think is deserved. I think they thought about it more like, these guys are smart. They know what they're doing. They know why these things work. And it's always been about the money. It's like, can we reach a statistically significant endpoint in a study so that we can get it approved and make $1 billion off of it?
Yeah. And then to contrast that with, two health systems that have existed for a very, very, very long time. I think the goal of traditional Chinese medicine and the goal of Ayurveda is not to make billions of dollars. It's to help you be healthy. It's to help you find a way to balance what's going on in your body and to provide a sort of framework to actually just being a healthy human being. But that's a very
live a more balanced life.
A more balanced life. Yeah, exactly. And those
and what have we done here in the United States against those? We've called them pseudoscience. Yep. We've called them, oh, that's just bullshit. The traditional Chinese medicine is bullshit. Ayurveda is bullshit. It's just, and it's a very ethnocentric view, I think. Like, hey, we're the white Westerners. We have real science. These guys are savages using, pseudoscience. We know what we're talking about. They have no idea. And it's very racist, honestly. When you talk to a lot of the medical professionals in the United States, you talk to a lot of the doctors, you talk to a lot of the university researchers, they hear traditional Chinese medicine, they hear Ayurveda, and immediately they write it off. They're like, this is bullshit. I'm like, you think an entire society has used something for 1,000 years because it doesn't work? Like, come on. You think it just happens to be that everybody's being taken advantage of in China by their traditional medicine? Or do you think maybe there's something there? They happened upon some things over a long period of time. They may not exactly know why or understand the mechanisms behind it, but over many generations, they've known you take this plant when you have this problem and you get better and you can get back to your normal life. I think we should take inspiration from that, not write it off. Like, why was reishi so prized by the emperors of China? Why was ashwagandha used in Ayurveda? Why does Bacopa work the way it does? And that's what we've done at Nootropics Depot, is to take these thousands of years of traditional use from all over the world and not look down on them and say, oh, well, we're Americans, we know what we're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. We take inspiration from them and say, hey, there's something here. Let's take modern Western science, not medicine, science, and try and figure out how these things work, and let's see if maybe we can make them better. And that's how we made Cognance, that's how we made Arinimax, that's how we made all these really interesting novel things that are based off traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda.
And it's, yeah, there's just one little tidbit I want to add, thinking back to the GI tract as a city or a village. It's also amazing and real that there are medicinal plants that are effective for healing us and so many of the issues that we experience, and they're growing all over the world. And they're sometimes very unique to a specific place. And they were probably uniquely used by a specific group of people for a certain amount of time until these results were discovered and then shared. And like,
there's history,
plants.
There's knowledge.
Yeah, and there's also like there's a connection between the people who are taking these things and researching them and the place where they're growing and the environment and the climate, and it's not just this sterile situation where there's a vacuum and there's a compound and there's a goal and there's a deadline. It's just like life is happening, things are growing, and people are taking it and eating it and pooping it out and seeing what happens. So that's a really just natural process.
And if we take even a step back with the pharmaceutical industry, a lot of the pharmaceutical compounds were derived from naturally occurring compounds. We didn't just wake up one day and go, oh, we're going to make Adderall. It's a completely new novel molecule. Like, no, that molecule literally exists basically in nature. Not exactly like that, but very close. We're like, oh, nature doesn't work. But there's some
phenylalanine is the backbone of amphetamine.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you look, I recently discovered that Wellbutrin is actually a cathinone derivative. And cathinone is in a plant called cat. And it is banned all over the world because people say, it's an addictive stimulant, blah, blah, blah. But then
that's what the Somalis chew when they shot down Black Hawk Down.
Exactly. Yeah. So... But there's a lot of really powerful compounds in nature, some of which can even kill you. So I think based on the fact that there are such powerful compounds, it means that some of them actually have really beneficial, powerful effects. So powerful that we based a lot of our pharmaceuticals on it. But now we're just wiping this, thousands of years of human history and formulation and experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And I found it really interesting when we made Panamax, looking into the combination of Schizandra and Panax ginseng and Sheng Mai San. Somehow they knew exactly what they were doing, even though they didn't have the scientific data to back it up. Now that we have the data to back it up, we know that Schizandra acts as a P-glycoprotein inhibitor. The ginsenosides in Panax ginseng are substrates for P-glycoprotein, so if you inhibit it, you have more absorption. But somehow they had a whole system around this, and that Schizandra is the chaperone. It's not a very important part of the formulation in terms of primary effects, but it makes the I think it's like the bishop or whatever they call it work better, and then that makes ginseng. So it's also not like these were dumb caveman people banging sticks together, waiting until something sticks. It was very, very organized and well done. And I recently was watching a podcast. Some of it seemed a little bit pseudoscientific, but about the ancient Roman and ancient Greek medicine systems, that they were very, very complex. So complex that you would even have a class of women that were born and then immediately assigned to being inoculated with snake venom, and then their bodies would start producing all sorts of crazy compounds that were then expressed in their breast milk, I believe. And then the breast milk was being used as medicine, which is also pretty fucked up. I mean, we're like creating human bioreactors, but they were going really far.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I mean, you got to think about it. The Chinese were the most advanced civilization for a long time. So this idea that China is this backwater place and they don't know what they're doing Americans need to wake up. Like
Oh yeah.
the amount of science and the amount of PhD scientists coming out of the schools in China dwarfs anything that we're bringing out, and we are being left behind scientifically. All it would take is one trip for Americans to go over to China and realize, oh shit, maybe the powers that be in our country are lying to us, and they're trying to extract all of the resources and money from us as long as they can and keep everybody in the dark. And they don't want people to be educated and enlightened because they will realize that this American dream they've been sold, this American excellence has been propaganda for a long time. And I think it's very much ethnocentric to say, well, I'm going to listen to an American doctor, not these, woo-woo traditional medicine practitioners in China, when by all measures, the Chinese are healthier than we are. So maybe we should be doing a little bit more of what they're doing and a little bit less of what we're doing. And the pharmaceutical industry wants it that way. As you said, Erika, this makes a lot of money. If you can sell processed foods, strip out all the nutrients, get people's microbiomes all screwed up where they get a lot of chronic diseases, and then you can also have ownership in the pharmaceutical companies that then create treatments for the symptoms. And then those treatments you have to get on regularly for the rest of your life. You can profit off of them by feeding them shitty food and profit off of them by fixing the symptoms of the problems that you caused by that shitty food. And it's this cycle of profit-driven motives that has resulted in, honestly, the economic crisis that we have in the United States.
And the health crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said,
I said economic. I meant health. They
go hand in hand.
But like you said, perhaps the initial instigation of, a pharmaceutical is not purely for the purpose of making money. Perhaps at one point in time it is just a discovery. Or like what you're talking about, Paul, with processed food. I'm thinking about McDonald's. Perhaps the founder of McDonald's was not thinking, I'm gonna make an entire country of people very sick, and I'm gonna destroy their microbiomes, and I'm gonna make tons of money. But
you can watch The Founder, the movie on the guy that made McDonald's what it is, not the original guy that created the small family chain of McDonald's, but the guy that made what we know as McDonald's. He was all about profit. It was all profit for him.
yeah. But like the initial guy who was
Right.
making hamburgers, it's not like he was setting out to destroy something.
But to be honest, that hamburger from, I don't know when McDonald's started, like 80 years, 100 years ago, it's a pretty old company, right? That burger probably had fermented pickles on it, decent beef,
Exactly.
maybe like a genuinely good bun, and that has all changed too now, just making everything very sterilized. And I think that's something a lot of people also kind of miss, that when I go to a supermarket and buy like an ultra processed cucumber and I slice it up, put some salt in it and vacuum seal it in a bag, almost nothing happens. If I then go to a farmer's market, I get a cucumber. I do the same thing.
And you don't even wash it.
And I don't wash it. 3 days later, that whole bag is inflated. It has fermented, and because all of the bacteria are on the surface. So when we're eating vegetables and all of these things, we are consuming large amounts of probiotics already because they're there, and you can expand them by fermenting it. But we are not eating that many fermented foods anymore, partially because we have refrigerators now, so there is no need to actually ferment your food for preservation. That's probably a big change. But then also now, like, a lot of foods are gamma irradiated to make them last longer. That just kills everything on it, or they're sprayed with stuff, or these glyphosates, they also kill bacteria. And we see it, we like wine, and we like natural wine specifically. And when you talk to a lot of the farmers who are making natural wine, they said, when I used to work at a really commercial farm, all of the grapes were being sprayed with so much antifungal stuff that all of the naturally occurring yeasts are dead. So if you try to spontaneously ferment those grapes, nothing happens. So you need to add yeast.
Right.
But if you have a natural vineyard and you're not doing any of that stuff, and the grapes will just spontaneously ferment. And the more attention you pay to microbial diversity in your fields, the better that wine will ferment, the better it will taste. So,
And microbial diversity in the form of different kinds of plants, animals,
yeasts,
yeasts.
just flying through the air.
Yeah. So the quick side note on the glyphosate thing, I have a lot of family in Kansas and they live next to the cornfields and there's constantly glyphosate spread everywhere. The amount of cancers that are happening on that side of the family that aren't happening on any of the family that has moved out of Kansas is crazy. Like it's so obvious. Family, I've had some cousins that grew up and then they moved to Oregon or they moved to another state, and then their entire family that stayed in Kansas died from cancer.
Wow.
Same genetics, but the one that left Kansas that is no longer sitting next to a cornfield being sprayed with glyphosate, they live and they don't have any of these cancers, but the family that stayed back all died. One of my cousins, every single other member of his family died from cancer.
That's insane.
And he got out. So these pesticides, these herbicides, these fungicides, all of this stuff that's going into the factory farming is having immense effects on our microbiome. And I spoke to a physician up at the University of British Columbia the other day, and we might be doing some research with her, but she has taken stool samples from patients. She's also a clinician. She works at the Children's Center there, and she works at the Center for IBD. So she's treating these patients. She takes their fecal samples, and then she has this system where she's created a anaerobic closed GI tract that she can replicate their entire GI tract, but in a controlled system where you can study it. You can put different probiotics in. You can put different fibers in. You can take mushrooms and put mushrooms in. That's one of the things she's super interested in. And what was really interesting in my conversation with her, other than the cool science that she's doing, she said that our microbiome isn't just bacteria. Everybody out there is starting to talk about the microbiome. They're starting to take it more seriously. But 99.9% of the people out there that are even talking about the microbiome are talking about probiotics. The 0.1% may be talking about phages, which we just had a call with a company that's doing some really novel phage stuff. Nobody is talking about fungi. There are fungi in your gastrointestinal tract that act as probiotics too, that aren't bacteria, but they act in a very similar way. And she wants to study that. She wants to study not only what fungi are in the GI tract, what they're doing, but also she's really interested in, the craze of mushrooms being sold now and the beta glucans, and she wants to understand maybe some of the benefits that we're getting from these functional mushrooms that we've been selling they're feeding the probiotics, the bacteria, but what if they're feeding the good fungi in your system? What if these mushrooms that you're taking are actually feeding this whole shadow part of your microbiome that nobody's even looking at yet?
Oh my gosh. I didn't know that there was a shadow microbiome. I thought that was
right?
just for my shadow self. But yeah, excellent.
But I think it's a really, really interesting thing because, as we said, every time you look into something, the deeper you go, the more complex it gets. Mm-hmm. And we're just touching the surface on the microbiome. And even that surface, we're only talking about one aspect of it. So I think it's the next 10, 20 years is going to be a deluge of science into the microbiome and understanding it and all that it's affecting in our lives.
Yeah. And I just had a really interesting thought. The fungi still contain chitin, and those fungi that live in our gut have chitinase, and they can use chitin because we were looking at some research that if you put chitin in substrates, then the mushrooms get denser, a little bit bigger, because they can actually use that chitin as a long storage form of nitrogen and then use that as a food source. So maybe we can actually digest chitin a little bit.
We can.
Fungi in our gut are doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. Well, I have a couple rants on Reddit because somebody from one of our competitors was arguing with me about chitin. And I'm like, look, chitin is a beta glucan. Chitin is a 1,4 branch beta glucan. So when you talk about beta glucans, chitin is part of that equation. And traditionally, we thought of chitin as this unusable, insoluble, non-digestible thing. But I think we've been wrong. I think the chitin, the chitin that's in the cell walls of the mushrooms is providing more nutrients to our microbiome than we've known because we weren't even looking at the fungal part of our microbiome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And also
Yeah,
kind of concerning, you had a fungal infection at one point and you were given an oral antifungal
Yeah.
agent. And I remember telling you like, that doesn't seem like a great idea, especially because it is in a very localized topical area. Like you should be getting a topical
right,
antifungal. Why are you getting like a system-wide antifungal? And now knowing this, like that's potentially a pretty bad thing. If
Yeah.
people
right.
who have skin issues are just willy-nilly being given very strong antifungals, that could be just as bad as just being on antibiotics all day, every
And you
day.
know what?
Right.
After I was finished taking that antifungal, after, I don't know, 2, 3 months maybe, it came back. So it wasn't like it got rid of it for
Right.
forever. If I really wanted it to stay away, I would have to continue to take that. But I don't want to do that because I know that it's probably going to be having detrimental effects to my health in some other way, even if it's not something I can perceive or feel, on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, the fungus came back, so it didn't even work. It
Right.
worked for a little while, but it didn't address the actual root of the problem. And I think the root of the problem is actually a little more rest, a little less stress, a little
Yeah.
more sunshine, and just taking better care of yourself because that actually works, and that's
And
something.
maybe InfiniFiber.
Hey, maybe
Absolutely.
InfiniFiber, yeah,
Well, and I forgot to mention earlier, but when we were talking about the instances of obesity going up, I think a part of the factor in the instances of obesity going up and the instances of colon cancer going up, the overuse of antibiotics is a big part of that. So not only has our food been strip mined of all the nutrients and glyphosate and all these other additives in there that are actively killing the probiotics in our system, but anytime you go into the doctor in the United States now, with a cold, with a flu, with some respiratory illness, Americans immediately want to get on an antibiotic. They want a Z-Pack. They want, a longer course. They want something to feel like, hey, I'm sick. My doctor gave me something. This is making me better. And for a while now, the overprescription of antibiotics has caused a real problem. And the bulk of the discussion around that has been around antibiotic resistant strains. But I think that doesn't get to the heart of the issue. I think overuse of antibiotics is partially responsible for this increase in colon cancer
Oh, yeah.
because it's reducing the microbial diversity in our GI tracts. It's partially responsible for the increase in obesity because it's destroying the microbial diversity of the probiotic strains that produce GLP-1. So it's all this interconnected system of poor food, overuse of antibiotics, stress, all of these factors going into just a complete destruction of our microbiome, which is having really, really bad effects on our health system as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's scary how often antibiotics are prescribed, especially for like a cold. It's viral. It's not even bacterial.
yeah.
It's not
Right.
to me. I think I've taken antibiotics twice in my entire lifetime. One time for a really bad sinus infection, and then one time when I got surgery. And I don't think I've ever taken antibiotics beyond that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, in the United States, I'm sure by the time you're 30, you will have been prescribed antibiotics at least 20 times.
At
Like,
least.
It's
for
crazy.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's
It's
different. Yeah,
nuts.
having been with you for 10 years, I don't know if I've taken
I
it.
don't think you've taken an
I don't
antibiotic.
think so. And I also felt very confused and a little bit concerned with your stance against antibiotics initially because I really didn't understand it. It's not the environment that I grew up in.
Right.
But now, it makes so much sense and it's also just yeah, the reality is we get sick. There's bacteria, viruses. They're looking for a place to live. They want to grow too. And we are the perfect host. So they come in, they set up camp, they do their thing, and we have to rely on our immune system to get over it and come out on the other side. And that's just how it works. But if you stop or change parts of that process, then you might have problems that persist for longer.
Oh,
and you might
Yeah,
have different
very.
kinds of damage and you know
And cause
the
more problems.
and cause more problems
Right
and
there.
being sick is not is it
it's
sucks,
not that bad. Yeah.
but it's not that bad if you have this knowledge and you understand my body's doing what it's supposed to. It's not a bad
Yeah.
thing. It's not a bad thing that I have a fever. It's not a bad thing that I got sick in the first place. My body's doing what it needs to, and I need to support my body's processes and my immune system to help it do what it can do on its own because it's very powerful and it has the ability to repair and to
Mhm.
heal. And that's what the supplements are doing. They're
Mhm.
supporting your body's natural processes to do what it can do. And let's say your body can't do all those things, then there are different options, and then you have to go to a different source. But there's a lot you can do to just
Yeah.
optimize what your body is actually capable of in its state
For sure.
without other interventions.
So I think it all stems back to this very westernized idea that we've conquered nature. We've removed ourselves from nature, right? We've created a modern society that doesn't depend on nature.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of people that live out in the countryside, that live on farms, that still realize, hey, we're a part of nature. But if you live in a big city and you don't really get exposed to how nature is providing for us, you can really go down this path of, well, we're removed from nature, right? We've created our own environment, and nature is its own thing, but we're not a part of it. But really, nature is the culmination of millions of years of evolution, and that includes our reaction to things. So
Mhm.
fevers, pain, all of these signals that your body gives off, they're useful things that your body uses for specific reasons. Trying to mask them all the time is just trying to rewrite millions of years of evolution and go, wow, we've beaten nature, so now we can just ignore these natural signals. And I think it's again another ethnocentric sort of viewpoint on the world.
Absolutely.
And also with considering our diets and the way that our diets have changed with time and being disconnected from nature too. I mean, maybe, once upon a time, people didn't need InfiniFiber because they were just eating a lot of plants and they were eating a lot of
Right.
fiber sources,
Mhm.
and that was just a part of everyday life. And
Well, and you still see that.
yeah.
It's really a problem within more of the Western world. If you look in Asia, no one has problems with eating enough fiber. They're eating like 50, 60 grams a day or something like that on average. We were looking up some
And they're eating
statistics.
fermented foods. They're eating
A lot.
kimchi.
Yeah.
They may not be consciously going, hey, I'm feeding my microbiome, but they're feeding their microbiome.
Yeah.
And it's in the culture, and it's a part of just life. So yeah, maybe at a certain point you wouldn't have needed to have supplements because you were living in a different time and in a different culture,
Right.
and you were more connected to nature, and it was probably a more balanced way of living, but we don't live that way anymore. And we're
Right.
not eating a whole cabbage every day. We do it
Mhm.
sometimes now actually. It's awesome. Addictive cabbage. Great recipe.
So there's a really interesting project that will be happening in September. Someone that I follow here in the Netherlands, she's a wild forager, and she's going to be part of a project where they're going to be eating, I think it's for a month or even a little bit longer, only wild forage foods. And then they're going to be
Ah,
testing their microbiomes before and after and during to see if anything changes. So they're going to be hunting for their protein sources, fishing for their protein sources, and then just going out into nature and only getting like wild berries, wild vegetables, all of this kind of stuff. She's quite nervous about it. She's preparing now and like seeing what kind of things can I actually eat here in the Netherlands because we don't have crazy amounts of edible foods. There is still a lot
right.
that can be wild foraged, but not like in other parts of the world. But
Can
she's
you eat the tulips?
actually in the Second World War, when the Hunger Winter was happening, the only food source left were the tulip bulbs, and I guess
Really?
they're edible. They're not good, but you can still eat them. There was like an emergency food source for a long time. But one thing
I've
that
eaten rose petals when I'm drunk.
yeah.
That's a little different.
That wasn't a survival
Yeah.
tactic.
No.
One thing you see in the Netherlands now, we have a bunch of invasive geese and they lay a lot of eggs. So she's like, okay, I can eat some goose eggs. I can eat the
Okay.
geese meat and see how that tastes and figure it out. But I'm actually very curious to see how
Yeah.
these people's microbiomes will change because I do think there is much more microbial and fungal diversity in wild foraged foods. And
Right.
we buy most of our food from a farm. We just like drive to the farm. They do everything just kind of organic, very natural. And I feel much better when we eat that food. Sometimes we have to drive there with my parents. We don't have a car. We all like to shop there. So when they go on vacation for like 2 weeks and we don't eat that food and we're eating from the regular supermarket, I don't feel as good. So
Right.
even just having it be a bit more natural like that, I can't imagine what it's like when it's not being
And
controlled.
that's Dutch supermarkets. Imagine our
Exactly.
supermarkets,
Well, to
our
be
strip
honest,
mine supermarkets.
yeah, when we went back to the US 2 years ago,
Yeah.
after having lived here for like a year and a half, we went to visit your sister in Nebraska, and there's just, you can't really get fresh food out there. It's like kind of a food
Yeah.
desert. And just eating that kind of food for a week, like I wasn't going to the bathroom at all. I might not have pooped once during our trip
Yeah.
in the US,
Yeah.
and I felt bloated and all weird and
Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't sleeping right. And then when we came back, it takes a while, but yeah, we definitely feel better.
And in my case, because I intermittent fast, it's
Mhm.
just really hard for me to get all the nutrients in the right ratios and balance that I can keep track of and ensure that I'm doing it right. So for me, like as we said, a lot of this stuff that we develop is partly because I want to have access to it. So in InfiniGreens and InfiniFiber, I take every day around 5, 6 p.m. And I know that I'm getting a bunch of nutrients, I'm getting my fiber, I'm getting prebiotics, and then I'm beta testing our two probiotics right now too. And when I take InfiniGreens and InfiniFiber every day, I feel great. And then now adding in the new probiotics we've been developing, you just feel better. You have more energy, you have more better mood, you sleep better, less inflammation. So I'm going to be going in and doing another round of function health testing, and it'll be interesting to see how cholesterol has been affected, how all of these inflammation markers, because that's really the key. Taking modern science, being able to measure things and standardize things
Mhm.
using what we've learned from the traditional cultures, but then, the proof is in the pudding. Measure the standardization of products, measure the biomarkers, see how you're objectively moving either in the right or the wrong direction.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about the results too.
Mhm.
And I think this is a good moment for us to wrap up the podcast because
Yeah.
we've really gone around the whole world. We've gone on a journey
Well, and we
talking
could,
about fiber, but also just talking about how important it is to take care of our microbiome and all of the different systems and ideas and innovation that's involved in creating InfiniFiber, which was, that was the seed, the starting point of the podcast. But I feel like we've gone really like way big scale from that, which has been super fun.
oh, we can go into a lot more. And I thought about mentioning it, but we'll do it in another podcast. We mentioned the beta glucan thing.
Mhm.
The beta glucans and the polysaccharides in mushrooms are a whole other area of study that needs to be fleshed out more because I do think there's a lot of really interesting things in there. And the Megazyme kits are horrible. They don't measure properly. They're constantly changing. So the way we measure beta glucans right now isn't appropriate. One cool thing, one little hint for the viewers, or an Easter egg for the viewers. We have a new piece of equipment that will be coming that is really really cool. It's like a $500,000 piece of equipment. It's a triple detector. I think it's actually a quad detector. Size exclusion chromatography machine. So some people on Reddit might have heard me mention that over the years. Years and years back, we recognized that the beta glucan measure and the Megazyme kits weren't accurate, and that was 3 kits ago. They've changed the kits twice since then. So, and we've known that, and I've always known that the next frontier for being able to measure polysaccharides and beta glucans and figure out how long each beta glucan is, what the branching structures on the beta glucans are, the things that really matter for what these beta glucans are doing. The way to measure that is called size exclusion chromatography. But I've also always known it's a very expensive piece of equipment. Not a lot of people know about it. Not a lot of people know how to run it or have done all the legwork. So to this point, we haven't really gone down that route. Well, finally, we will be. This machine will be coming here, and we'll do some video content on it. We'll show it, but we'll finally have the ability to do some really in-depth measurements of not just beta glucans, but polysaccharides, but also fibers. So one of the detectors on this machine is going to allow us. It's a viscosometer. Viscosity. It's going to have us be able to measure the viscosity. So we're going to be able to bring our fiber testing in-house on this new machine, and it'll show you how long the branching fibers are, what the branching structures on the fibers, what their viscosity is, all these really interesting things that currently nobody's even talking about. So, like we're always on the forefront of formulation and doing really novel things. We're also on the forefront of applying science in the background in the lab to measure things and standardize things in new ways. So I'm pretty excited about that new machine. It's going to allow us to really push fiber forward, our understanding, even from where we are now. Admittedly, I think the world's most advanced fiber, it's going to allow us to push forward there. But then the fiber aspect of beta glucans, mushrooms, polysaccharides, and this machine will allow us to do protein analysis. It'll allow us to do liposome testing. It'll allow us to do all sorts of really interesting tests that we can't do in the lab now. So I'm super excited about that.
Me too. Yeah.
Awesome.
We're gonna get a lot of cool.
And we
data out of that.
got a great deal on it too. So there's a guy up in Alaska that's been studying seaweed for 10 years. And I think a lot of people here know we worked for 6 years on Aclonia cava. We started an office in South Korea for us to be able to get the Aclonia cava, standardize it, and bring it over here. And I think seaweeds are going to be one of the next big frontiers. Mushrooms kind of blew up the last 10 years. Everybody's like, oh, there's all these mushrooms that have been used for thousands of years in traditional Chinese medicine, but it's only been the last 10 years that they've blown up here. I think seaweeds are next because there's just thousands of different seaweeds around the world. There's fucoidins, which are the beta glucans of the sea. There's the fluorotannins like diecol that we have in Aclonia cava that are anti-cancer and have all these benefits. This machine will allow us to do this really advanced seaweed research too.
Very cool.
Be very cool.
I am
Maybe we'll have a seaweed fiber.
Oh, yes.
That'd
That
be
sounds
cool.
amazing. I'm really glad that everyone in the chat has been having such a wonderful time. And I'm saying this ahead of time because, of course, we're recording this podcast. It's going to be released a little bit later. But I know for sure that it's going to be a very lively chat because we've gotten into so many different topics and it's been so much fun. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And thanks, Paul, for sharing a few fun, exciting updates for what's coming in the future. It's just really
and hopefully,
amazing.
I think people realize when we're developing products, you can hopefully see the passion that comes through. Like we really care about this stuff, and we really want to make the best products, not just for ourselves and our families, but for everybody out there. Because for a long time, I was doing teaching and doing telecommunications, but it wasn't really a passion for me. I like teaching, but who cares about telecom, right? Who cares about connecting phone systems together? But what we've done the past 13 years at Nootropics Depot, I think has really shown me that this is my calling. This is something where I can actually make a meaningful difference in the world. And I think what we're doing to educate consumers, to get people to be excited about things like fiber, to get people to be excited about how their brains and bodies work and how to better improve their lives, I think is making a meaningful difference in the world. So hopefully that passion and that energy shows through, so that when you see a new product that we develop, you realize all of this energy that we put into it and all this effort, because it really is a lot of work to do a lot of these things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've had this discussion so
Neil
many
knows.
times. Oh yeah. I have people coming to me now, like friends who are like, I'm thinking of making a supplement. And I'm like, don't do it. Like, are you willing to lose your sanity for like a couple of years before you really figure out how everything works? Like it is way more difficult than people realize. It is
Yeah.
so multidisciplinary
Yeah.
and yeah.
But you know what's not
And you have
difficult?
to be passionate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. What's not difficult is going to nootropicsdepot.com and ordering all these really well formulated supplements and receiving them very quickly and taking them
Yeah.
and experiencing the benefits. Okay, so I really do think it's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Emil. It's been
Thanks.
really, really fun. Thank you to everyone who has stuck around until the end of the podcast. We're really excited for next month. It's going to be a new topic, new research, new discussion. And if you like this video, please share it with your friends. Tell your family, try InfiniFiber. If you've tried it, let us know how you like it. Tell us on
Yes.
Reddit. Tell us in the comments on YouTube. We really, really want to hear what you're experiencing and how it's going for you. So don't be shy. Please reach out, and we will see you again next month. Bye.
See
Awesome.
ya.